and it will end up on our YouTube channel as well, so people can find it there too. So there's
Cool.
lots of ways if people want to find this or share it or do whatever they want to do. So anyways, a little bit about Warwick. So we are located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. We are open for business. We've been open since about towards the end of May. So we've been open for a while. Everything's good. Doing masks, social distancing, but like I like to say, any way that there is to get a book, you can get it from Warwick. So support independent bookstores. Jillian's books are available. Dan's books are available. I will be putting links to Dan's book in the comment section. So for anybody that's watching this right now, and I'll be talking to people in the comments too, that if they have any questions or anything, they can put those in there and I'll bring those into the conversation towards the end there. Dan and Jillian are going to talk for about 35-ish minutes. Probably could go on for hours, I bet, but we'll keep it a little bit. We'll keep it down a little bit. But anyways, that's about it for Warwick's. We've got some watchers here. So like I said, as people start joining us, I'll be communicating with them in the chat room too. So let's get the program started. So Dan Mathews was born and raised in Orange County, California by a single mother who encouraged her boys to bring home stray animals. In high school, he was beaten up for being gay and credits those rough times with helping him develop the thick skin needed to be an animal activist. He spent 2 years in Italy working as a fashion model and bit part actor before returning to the US. He began working at PETA as a receptionist and within a year was organizing projects. As PETA's director of campaigns, his job is to increase awareness of the rights of animals through high-profile events. He has been arrested for his activities more than 20 times. Through a unique combination of sex, humor, and glamour, he has turned animal rights into one of the hottest causes of the last 2 decades. And Jillian Michaels is an 8-time New York Times bestselling author, fitness guru, and certified professional trainer. Michaels has dominated the health and wellness space with hit television shows, immensely successful fitness DVDs, her exercise streaming platform, an award-winning podcast, and live speaking engagements. We could not be happier to have both of you here tonight. Let's have a great conversation, and I'll see you in about a half hour.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
You know, Dan, my arrest record doesn't even compare to yours. That's so disappointing. You know that I'm disappointed by this. I mean, oh my goodness. So for everybody watching, we are here today to talk about none of those accolades, really. We're talking about your new book, Like Crazy. That's right, Life with My Mother and Her Invisible Friends. And so you guys know, this book has taken, I have one of my dogs in the room. Welcome to Life at Home on Zoom. My kid might come upstairs in a minute as well. Dan and I have been friends for, a long time.
11 years, I think. I tried to figure it out yesterday, and I think it's 11 or 12 years.
Yeah, a heck of a long time.
Yeah.
And years ago, I knew about PETA and the work that Ingrid had done. I had not yet met Dan. So I reached out to the organization and was like, look, I love animals. You know, what can I do? How can I be helpful? So Dan sat down with me, and this is where our amazing friendship began. And you have had me out protesting the circus. I mean, carriage horses in New York we were going after. Friggin', I mean, what happened? Remember when we were going to be naked outside of Hermes, and my business partner was like, this will break every morality clause. We were going to be in body paint. I wasn't allowed to do that one. But we have had the best time, and I have had the best time with you doing all of this stuff. But more importantly, we became friends along the way. And I know your story with your mother, and that's what this book is about. But can you tell everybody what is this book? It's not about PETA. It's not about being gay. It's not about being a model. What is the book about?
Well, I always credited my mother with instilling in me the drive to protect animals from the earliest age. And my mother was a kook. She grew up in the Depression era, bouncing between orphanages and foster homes. And she was everybody's favorite character in my first book, Committed, because she was so kooky. We moved in shopping carts once because we didn't have a car. You know, she was always a little out of her mind, but she was very witty. She was so supportive of all of my outcast friends and sort of became this den mother to all the outcasts. And when I got out of high school, I saved up $1,000 and moved to Italy. And I wanted to get as far away from my family and from all that to kind of recalibrate myself. And when I hit 40, when I was in my early 40s, my mom was kind of going downhill. She had actually, at one point, even lived at the Salvation Army. My brothers and I took turns helping her get apartments and all that. But she was just having problems. And so as much as I am not a family person by sensibility or definition, I felt that I really owed my mom so much, not just because I loved her, but because she instilled in me all these values that I didn't have to reinvent myself after college. She was delighted that I was gay. She was delighted that I was vegan. She was thrilled when I would get arrested in protest. And so I just had this great, I was very lucky. So when she was on her way down in her late 70s, I bought this dilapidated Victorian house in Portsmouth, Virginia, where PETA's based across the river in Norfolk, our East Coast headquarters. And I moved her in. And I was so over my head. I don't know how to fix anything. To me, a screwdriver is a cocktail, not a tool. And she certainly is not handy. So it was like, I moved her into this house because I knew she was going to be crashing and burning. I just had this sense and I wanted to look after her. And it was only after moving her in, after a few years, that I would come home and find she was having conversations with imaginary people. She would always have these emotional meltdowns or slip into mania. But she had a pretty spectacular breakdown after 3 or 4 years. And I was able to lure her out of the house. She wouldn't see any doctor. I told her we were going to the Krispy Kreme, and I brought her to the psych ward. And I had to commit her. And it was, she was so out of her head. She thought that my brothers were dead. She thought that my niece was dead. She thought she was lighting candles all over the house for everybody that she thought was dead, which was pretty much everybody. And so I was shocked when the diagnosis came back after a few days that she was a lifelong untreated schizophrenic. She actually made it to 80 without meds. And as soon as she was diagnosed, I read every memoir on schizophrenia, every book I could get my hands on. And one of the most recent books from about 6 years ago by a neurologist said, everything we have read about schizophrenia is from cases that were treated and people were under observation, whether, in a home or an asylum or, a hospital. They wrote the line, the natural path of an untreated schizophrenic is unknown in medical literature and in pop culture. And I just thought, wow, my mom was so kind-hearted, and the portrayal of schizophrenics in popular culture and on crime dramas is that they're totally nuts and they're going to kill you, or they're violent people. And I learned that schizophrenics are actually less violent than the average person. People are violent to them because of their odd behavior. I started seeing my mom not as a tragic victim, but as a kind of weary survivor. And when I thought about how she got me into animal rights at such a young age, it occurred to me she could not maintain a long-term relationship with humans, but she always had this incredibly deep bond with animals. And she passed that on to me from the earliest age. We brought in stray cats who were being abused. We just always looked out for animals. I renounced fishing when I was 12 or 13, soon became vegetarian, then vegan. I started working at PETA right after college at age 20. And last month was my 35th anniversary at PETA. And so in writing this book, there's a lot of animal rights in the book. There's a lot of gay rights in the book because she was so, involved. She was gassed in 1980 marching against the KKK. She raised me to be a very engaged person. And I just thought, there needs to be a book out there that spotlights a schizophrenic who's not violent and who didn't rip everything apart that she touched. And certainly there was a lot of pitfalls in my mom's life because of her mania. but she also raised 3 successful children and had a lot to contribute to the world. And so she also had a devilish sense of humor. To give you an example, on her deathbed, she basically, the reason she had this breakdown is that her body was breaking down when she was, 82, and she couldn't keep up the bluff anymore of not hearing the voices. She bluffed her way through all these things because she didn't want to end up getting lobotomized in the 50s or 60s, having her children taken away from her in the 70s. She just bluffed her way through. But when her body started breaking down, she was not able to keep the bluff up any longer. But minimal meds made the voices disappear, made the crazy sounds disappear. There was no longer a plane crashing on our street outside. There were no longer people peeping into the second floor window, magically hovering somehow. And she had this wonderful peace of mind for her last several months of life. And I take the whole journey of that, discovery and all that in the book. But on her deathbed, I'm so happy she got to die right here at home rather than in a sterile hospital or something like that. She was surrounded by me and my husband, Jack, and our other friends. But there was a hospice nurse who was here. And as my mom was like, in her last days, the hospice nurse said, "Now, have you two discussed the inevitable?" And my mom said, "Oh yes, when my time comes, I'm gonna try to hold on till Thursday because on our block, they haul away the trash on Fridays." So the book is filled with witticisms. Even though it's about mental health, it spotlights an incredibly witty, it's a lot of dark humor, but it's been a thrill and it's been received so well. It's only been out 2 weeks and I've been so overwhelmed by the response.
Well, speaking of that, I actually pulled one of the reviews, and this is from Real Simple, and it says, "Like Crazy" by Dan Mathews. Dan Mathews knew he was in for an adventure when he relocated his 78-year-old mother across the country to live with him. And what he didn't know was that her often unpredictable behavior was due to an undiagnosed disorder, schizophrenia. Like Crazy is deeply compassionate, hilarious. It's an occasionally hilarious look at what it means to care for a parent as they enter their last phase of life. And then pretty much every other review has called it hilarious, uplifting, heartfelt, a must read. I expect nothing less of you, but how does that make you feel, Dan? I know it took you 11 years. So what happened over those 11 years? Why 11 years? And how does that make you feel after 11 years?
Well, I feel really good because I've been dealing with this my whole life. And even though I'm a fairly well-educated person and a news junkie, I didn't know my own mother was schizophrenic until she was 82. And so I thought there's such a misunderstood disease. Also, we don't really know how to deal with death in this culture. And we don't know we discard seniors like cigarette butts in this culture and in the US and a lot of other countries. And so I thought, you know what? I didn't know what I was doing. I was a mess. I was in over my head, but I just did it because it was the right thing to do. And I pulled through with the help of a lot of incredible friends. Oddly enough, when I moved in my mom and bought this dilapidated house, I thought, I am off the market now. Nobody's really going to want to date me because I've got too much baggage. That's fine. I just accepted that. But then only 6-7 months after I moved my mom in, I met Jack. And Jack is a year younger than me, but was married for 19 years, has 4 children from this previous sexuality, and had just gotten separated from his wife and was coming out. And Jack's brother actually lives in La Jolla. Hi, David and Julie, if you're watching. And Jack was coming to grips with this midlife crisis of his own, coming out with his kids and all that stuff. And he was in his most desperate point. I was in my most desperate point. Jack happened to be adopted 3 times, so he knows the orphan routine. And my mom grew up in orphanages, and they formed this instant orphan bond of looking out for each other. I've heard about that before, but I hadn't seen it really come to life until I saw them, and they weren't going to let anything happen to either one of them. So they developed their own bond separate than my relationship with them. And so Jack and I just fell in love immediately and started dating. And after a year or so, he moved in, and he's a big part of the book because of his story and our life. We're also big partiers. We live in Portsmouth, Virginia. We've got really cool bars all around here. And when we're not on lockdown, there are lots of lively characters. There's ex-cons, there are people that work on ships from around the world. There's tattoo artists because it's a Navy town and they have stripper girlfriends. And believe me, all of those people and more are a part of our life. And I was not somebody that I could think would ever ask somebody for help with my situation. But my good friend Riley, who's a DJ at a strip club, I mentioned that I was traveling and my mom had an eye doctor appointment. He said, oh, I'll take her and I'll take her to the library. I know she likes to get bird watching books. So yes, just every salty character from the South that you can imagine populates our wonderful Old Town Portsmouth, Virginia. And they all gravitated toward my mother because she was so funny and became her friend. And it just goes to show, we just doing the right thing and following your heart can open your life to all sorts of fantastic things. And that's the overall message of the book. And also, we live in such a segmented country and right now, yes, I've got right-wing friends. Yes, I have evangelical friends. I have gay friends. I have, this story and this town shows that we can all actually not only live in harmony, but be really good friends and have a great time. And, we're all here to kind of push each other along in life. And I think this book really shows that. And also because of the PETA activities, which recur throughout the book. There's a whole section where I meet Jack and then I'm able to go on the road for activism again. And for instance, during our Ringling Brothers campaign, the final phase, which Jillian, you were really essential in leading protests at Staples Center in LA and other places, doing videos. I would travel the country with this bull hook, which is like a fireplace poker, and they would beat the hell out of elephants with it to get them to perform. So I traveled around the country with this bull hook to show it to the press and get the circus exposed in different places. And so there was that. There was, I'm very involved in gay rights too. And when Obama had not followed through on his promise to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell in his second term, these gay activists flew me to an activist training in Knoxville to train gay activists to disrupt Obama events, shouting him down about Don't Ask, Don't Tell until he fulfilled his promise. So I got to train them to be disruptors because I disrupt so many meat trade conventions, fur fashion shows. And so it was a thrill to put my disruption skills to use for gay rights as well. And then within 2 months, Obama repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It paved the way for his position to change on gay marriage. And so this story overlaps with a lot of issues that we're all, living through right now. In addition to the story about my mom. And also in the end, it's a love story. Jack is downstairs somewhere.
Speaking of Jack, look, I know you, so I'm thinking to myself, people watching must wonder, right? You talked about your mother being afraid of getting lobotomized in the 50s. So she's old school to a certain extent, or you would think so. She comes from a generation where gay is as bad as it gets. Yet you have always told me how she immediately accepted it and bonded with Jack, and how you were always her child, how your brothers were more like your father. Can you tell me a little bit about coming out to her? Were you afraid? How this also was part of the impetus of you taking this chance to try to take care of her when you were not qualified or found a way? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Somehow the kids at junior high school knew I was gay before I did, because I was called a fag from 6th grade onward and beat up all the time. I got gay bashed all the time. And, my mom was so great because she fully supported. She brought me, as soon as that happened, Rocky Horror had just started playing at midnight. So she's like, do you realize you're a part of this incredible subculture? You are so lucky to be gay. She took me to see La Cage aux Folles, the French film, when it debuted in 1979. She brought me to thrift shops to get drag outfits to go to Rocky Horror and bring all of my friends from high school whose parents wouldn't let them go. My best friend, Michael, when he contracted AIDS, his mother told him, I'd rather have heard that you were a serial killer rather than you were gay. So he moved out and moved in with my mom. My mom nurtured him into the grave. She just was always there for the, you know, that she was always sympathetic, and always not only sympathetic, but really, you know, my brothers had to come in to her. They were like, I'm sorry, I hope we're not going to disappoint you, but we're actually straight. She's like, that's fine, you can't help it. So there's a lot of that in the book as well. You know, her spirit was so phenomenal. And then that's also what was a big appeal for her with Jack, is that, you know, he was closeted growing up, and because he, you know, was adopted, he didn't really feel like he could open his heart to people in his family, even though he loved them and they were great. But with my mom, he felt this instant like openness because he knew how supportive she was, and nothing needed to be qualified. And so it was wonderful. And the book is, you know, even though it charts the tale of somebody sinking into the depths of schizophrenia, it's really fun, and it's funny because she was funny. That's what took me so long to write this book, because if you write a book about mental health that's funny, you better damn well make sure it hits the mark. Otherwise, it can be considered insensitive, or, you know, like for instance, D.B. Weiss, who's the co-creator and writer of Game of Thrones, is a friend. And I was telling him about it. His brother is the director of psychology for the LA County jails, who deals with schizophrenics every day, all day. And I asked him if he would read an advance copy to let me know if I was off the mark and how I represented the disease and the treatment and all that stuff. And he said, not only was it on the mark, but he's going to recommend it to everybody he works with, because it is such a more accurate and sensitive and funny portrayal of how things happen. I mean, one of the things with schizophrenics we all have to understand is when somebody is hearing a voice or having a vision or a thing, you can't tell them they're not hearing it, because in their mind they are. Schizophrenia is simply an overabundance of dopamine in your system. And when you have an overabundance of dopamine, it blocks message centers in your brain. It makes you think somebody said something, somebody thought something, because your brain is just a little garbled occasionally. And, you know, emotional situations can make it worse. And of course, my mom grew up in orphanages. She just had a pretty rough life. My dad was wonderful, but after 11 years, he had to bail because she was just so nuts. And I think, you know, so many times she would have these, you know, hear things that, no, Mom, a plane didn't crash on the street. No, you know, our newly born niece is not dead. And no, Michael didn't just have a heart attack. You can't say those things. You just have to say, oh, how awful. What should we have for dinner? And move on. That's what you have to do. And that's what you should do with people who are having any kind of mental break, because the minute there's conflict and you're trying to convince them they did not hear that or feel that or see that, it sets up a conflict that only goes downhill. And so that's one of the big messages in the book, is it's a little bit of a guidepost for how to treat or how to deal with parents who are suffering from these things. And you just got to learn how to get by. You got to learn how to slide by, you know, avoid conflict, and how to make everybody have a happier life, including yourself. And let's face it, COVID is not the only crisis in the country right now. People are they're melting down on lockdown, and the psych wards are filled up. Mental health crises, our numbers are swelling across the country. So in a sense, this is a timely book so that people can read about mental health in a way that is not so terrifying, but is in fact has some really good tips. So I've been gratified to hear that from a bunch of readers.
You know, it's funny, you talk about being concerned that, you know, it could come off tone deaf or insensitive, but this is your family. You guys are inherently kind of just quirky and unique and crazy in the best way. And Dan, if it hadn't been like that, you wouldn't be you, she wouldn't have been her, and the book wouldn't be entertaining in the way that it is. When you read it, it's just you're gripped, and you like literally page by page just cannot wait to see what's going to happen next and how this is going to happen or how that's going to happen. How are you guys going to get through X, Y, and Z? And then when you get to the very end, you like slow down because you just want to savor like each and every moment with the characters. And, again, it's like, I know you, but reading it, it was like reading about someone else to a certain extent. I can say that my experience with you, always in a world that's so black and white, right? You have always been so tolerant. I remember I wore a pair of ostrich shoes. Do you remember on Wendy Williams? I didn't even know. They were given to me by a stylist. I didn't even think about it. And I don't know, she said to me, Wendy Williams made a comment, right? Like, oh, you love animals, but you wear ostrich shoes. And I was like, I don't know. I hear they're not nice birds. And you didn't attack me. You didn't jump on my ass. You were like, hey, Jill, just so you know, here's some information on ostrich farms. They're actually really sweet. Like, gave me all the, no judgment, no nothing. And I was like, oh my God. And I threw out the shoes. We'll never do it again. I mean, but the way that you educate has a tolerance. There's no attacking. And do you think, by the way, your approach that you use so effectively with PETA, which I'll get to in a minute, in part comes from your mother's empathy and understanding?
I think it might be because she had a lot of empathy and she had a lot of compassion and understanding, but she could also be really confrontational. And I can be confrontational in certain situations too, but I think this was something that I learned over life. I grew up in the punk rock scene. I love to make a scene at Thanksgiving dinner. I did all those things and I understand it. It's a natural reaction to the atrocities you learn about from factory farming, from in any slaughterhouse, this struggle with an animal that wants to live. They don't want to have their throat slit or be boiled alive in a defeathering tank. But I think in my first book, Committed, goes through all of that in a lot of detail, because I think we just have to learn how to be effective. And that's what's one great thing about getting older, is that you learn from your own mistakes and you figure out which things are going to work better with people and which approaches. And I think education is a really big thing. I mean, we live in a world that has so many distractions and it's already filled with so much bad news that people will, tune things out. And so PETA's always had a real flair for, the rather go naked than wear fur campaign. Who doesn't want to look at, a bunch of naked people protesting on a runway? I mean, or whatever. I'm sure some people don't want to see that, but it just grabbed attention in a way that used some style to make people reflect on the suffering. And we've had such big success now. We actually stopped the Rather Go Naked Than Wear Fur campaign this year after 30 years, because just about every major designer has abandoned it now. Versace, Chanel stopped not only fur, but exotic skins, Armani. And now all these companies all these designers that stopped using fur, we're now meeting with them. Before lockdown, I was in Milan meeting with Versace, Armani, Jill Sander, to talk about the alternatives now to leather and to wool and to exotic skins, and how there's no need to kill an animal for fashion in any purpose, in any way. For instance, I was in Spain, where the cork industry is based, in Spain and Portugal. Cork can be used just like leather, and all cork is part of a tree. They shave off the outer bark of the cork trees, and they use it in a way that is just like leather. And now a lot of designers are switching to that. And we show them samples of all the incredible, in Hawaii, they're developing pineapple leather, and in Italy, they're developing grape leather, and all these things made from, not dead things. When you have a dead thing that you're trying to wear, you have to marinate it in all these toxic chemicals to get it to not decompose. But all these incredible new vegan materials, the cork industry propagates forest growth because it expands the cork forest, whereas the leather trade, they chop down the Amazon jungle to create cheap grazing land for cattle who are used for leather. So I think just tying it all together for everybody and spotlighting ways we can live without being destructive. And it's actually more healthy for us and healthy for the environment. And, you know, we can't forget that we're only on lockdown right now because somebody decided to capture wild animals, confine them in a live animal market, butcher them, and have their blood intermingle with the blood of fish and chickens, and whether it was a bat or a pangolin. And that's the only reason we have COVID, is because of capturing and killing exotic animals. The only reason we have HIV and AIDS is because African green monkeys were captured and killed and eaten, and the virus jumped from monkeys to people. The 1918 pandemic, which we call the Spanish flu only because Spain was the first country to actually write about it and acknowledge it, it started on pig and chicken farms in Kansas. So whether it is a exotic animal live market in Wuhan or a slaughterhouse in Iowa or in, it's just, there's a lot of, the world is coming to its knees now because of our bloodthirsty appetite for animals and for capturing wildlife. And so there's going to be some really great big news at PETA coming out the next week. We just scored 2 more major designers who are no longer going to use exotic skins because we've educated them about how exotic skin trade is not just cruel to animals, but was just found to be a risk at spawning the next pandemic because of how the animals are captured from the wild and confined and mixed with other animals.
You and I had that conversation about Wuhan. So when you were talking about that, but you sent me an article about that and what you guys were doing with that though. So like speaking just of everything that's going on with PETA, beyond the fur exotic skins, what are the top priorities in, my goodness, when you have the ability to get back into the world? Or
we never shut down. We kept on going. After the Wuhan story came out, and everybody talked about that for a week, and then it was about the fact that we couldn't find toilet paper. But PETA went and did a 6-country investigation to show how these animal markets exist all over the place, and to show the risk from our own slaughterhouses in the U.S. and how they're COVID hotspots. There's just before this whole thing broke, 60 Minutes did a piece on the pork trade, on the pig industry, and it exposed the fact that we know that the pigs are kept in such horrible conditions that they're pumped full of antibiotics, and people that eat pork especially have become resistant to the antibiotics when they get sick. So drugs don't work on people because of how much drugged animal meat they have eaten. They have also found certain slaughterhouses that were spawning salmonella and that were spawning these antibiotic-resistant strains. And the pork industry, the pig farmers, now refuse to allow government inspectors onto their property because they don't want the bad press. That's the kind of world we live in. People think, oh, if it can be done more humanely or this or that. No, it's just really so awful. And it's not only bad for the animals, but it is now bringing down humanity.
I'm watching this.
There's a lot of hope.
No, well, that's where we're going. That's where we're going, Dan. So I'm watching this, and I'm not yet a member of PETA, or I'm just becoming familiar with you. Okay, so we're gonna table the book for 1 second. I'm gonna come right back to that, but what can I do to support the cause? How can I get involved? And I wanna say to everybody out there, like, you don't need to become a vegan overnight. You don't need to give up everything. Like I didn't, and the way that you baby stepped me into like understanding and learning and making changes, and it didn't have to be all or nothing, and there's zero judgment. Like, what can I do to make a difference? Where can I learn more about all of this stuff that you guys are doing? Go.
Well, I think the first thing is to educate yourself and gauge your, just read everything. Go to PETA.org. We have information on everything, every single animal issue there. And we urge people to look at all the incredible options now to meat and dairy, whether it's, choosing to have coconut milk or almond milk or oat milk. because the dairy industry is it's not only unhealthy for people, but it's really, really violent. They take away these calves right after they're born. And if the mothers, my best friend in Texas grew up on a dairy farm, the mothers wail for days and days and days mourning their kids, their lost children. And then they get artificially inseminated and have another one until 12 babies are lost. And then if they're spent, they're sent to the slaughterhouse. So just, there's a lot of things that people don't realize. We are such slaves to commercials on TV, and we want to have that, that dollar meal or that, whatever thing. And
I'm sorry,
I think
Dan.
right.
Of course. We were doing so good. Hang on. Hold on, Dee.
I think the thing is that, now you can go to parties and get a Beyond Burger, get a Beyond Sausage. You can, there's so many options out there. And so, most of our friends here in Portsmouth are not vegetarian or vegan. They come to our house and we have these dinner parties, and everyone is so amazed at the quality and how easy and convenient it is to eat vegan. So that's one thing. It's just open your taste buds. Beyonce and Jay-Z did this thing where they would go vegan for 30 days to really get themselves into good shape. 3 months before she did Coachella, Beyonce went totally vegan so that she would have the stamina and the health. And they've mostly stayed there. Bill Clinton was at death's door and he went vegan and reversed his heart disease.
Quadruple bypass, I think. Yeah, that is the wake-up call, if I remember correctly. Quadruple bypass, I think.
But I think just go to PETA.org and educate yourself. And if you want to read my first book, Committed, it really is a good book for people who aren't necessarily wanting to jump in, but are interested in the issue. And I think, Julie, they may be selling my first book, Committed, as well as the new one, Like Crazy, at Warwick.
Yeah. Speaking of the new one, so Julie just came on, which I know I'm over my time. So
that's okay. Yep, go with your question.
So just my last, okay. Dan, what are you hoping most of all that people take away from Like Crazy?
From my new book, Like Crazy, I hope that people will be a little more understanding of those suffering mental illness. The way it impacted my life going through the whole issue with schizophrenia, for instance, Jack and I live 3 blocks from the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, which has got a lot of freshly discharged soldiers suffering PTSD. We meet them at the bars. We meet them occasionally here or there, and we include them in our dinner parties. We invite them over to our after-hours dance parties, and we're not freaked out by them. You can see these people who are seem a little disturbed, and that makes people look at them like, and we've now come to recognize it. And it's very fulfilling to us to see them laugh and to see them dancing. And when their girlfriends, their family come to bring them back to New Hampshire or whatever the hell, they come over. And so I think just, there is a huge mental health crisis in this world. And instead of ignoring it, I hope that this book makes people understand how to deal with it in a way that not only is more kind to the people, but also makes you feel a little better about yourself. I mean, we've just got to come to terms with this. And they'll also learn about, a little bit of animal rights, a little bit of gay rights, but it's mostly a romp. It's a pretty fun adventure.
Everybody get the book and get it from Warwick, who was kind enough to host our little Zoom today, Like Crazy, Life with My Mother and Her Invisible Friends. All right, Julie, I will hand it back to you.
So great. Thank you, Jillian. That was so great. I mean, both of you, your hearts just came through. I mean, you both have just giant hearts, and it was such a great conversation. So thank you. We do have a couple comments, so I'm going to bring in some comments and questions here for us. So Sarah, she's been commenting all night about some of the things that you said along the way. Nurtured him to the grave. That's a really poignant phrase. That was a really good one. But she has a question here about your writing process. Dan's book took 11 years to write. What aspect of writing, research, or thinking took the longest to do?
Well, I think the construction, the organization of it, because when you're writing about something as like mental health, where it can be alarming, and schizophrenia in particular, I moved my mom back. She was with me for about 5 years. But in the book, because it's so incredible right here in Portsmouth, Virginia, we have all the seasons. We get blizzards, we get hurricanes, we get, we're by the swamp, and we really we embrace the seasons here more than, just about any other place. We're just right in that perfect spot. So I decided to organize the book in 4 sections, 4 different seasons. And so it opens with, winter of 2008 and her acclimating here and meeting my friends and me seeing some early warning signs. And that's the whole first section. Then I skip ahead a year to spring of 2009. And it's about the garden parties and her birthday. And they put up, you could see the progress after a year, or the regress in some sense. Then you skip ahead to fall of 2010 and finally ahead. And so if anybody's ever seen the movie Meet Me in St. Louis, the Judy Garland classic, that movie takes place in an old Victorian, and it's structured over the course of 4 seasons. There's a big Halloween section, there's a big Christmas thing. And so I was kind of inspired by that. I thought, this is a Victorian, it's an odd family saga, a little bit different characters than in the Judy Garland movie, a little bit more edgy. She didn't, but I thought it was such a great structure that I kind of wanted to emulate that. And so it worked out really, really well, I think. And so organization is everything. And also, having things be concise and not going on too many tangents. And there was a whole lot of things that I had to cut out to make it flow. And I will say the only editorial input or advice that I got from my publisher at Simon & Schuster was, they said, Portsmouth is such a phenomenal place and it comes so much to life in this book. I had a prologue that wasn't set in Portsmouth and an epilogue that wasn't. And they said it has to begin and end in the house in Portsmouth. Go on the road trip to Missouri, go on the, but the house and the little town is so phenomenal, and nobody really has heard about Portsmouth, Virginia before, even though it goes back to the 1600s. And so and I thought that was really good advice.
Because sometimes those are actually characters of a book too. Places are very much as of a character as actually people are. Which kind of leads, talking about the writing, kind of leads a little bit into Beth's question. And she says she can't wait to read like crazy. Other than your own experiences, did you do other research in writing the book?
I did, because it's a big responsibility to write a book about schizophrenia that as soon as she was diagnosed, I mean, the whole story, I knew it was because my mom is so quirky and the whole experience was so odd, and it's reflective of so many people, especially after the recession, multi-generational households, people moving back in with their parents. Everyone's grappling with that. And that's also what this book is about, and how you can, deal with the torments of it as well as find the joys. But as soon as she was diagnosed, I'd been taking notes all along for all the different years. But as soon as she was diagnosed, I did read every book on schizophrenia so that I could regurgitate it properly. Actually, there's a chapter in the book that's set in this bathroom. Right behind me is my giant beat up clawfoot tub. And that's where I would sit and every night and read every schiz book. And it's all set in this bathtub, that chapter. And so I take everybody through the history of schizophrenia, that when people were leaving their little villages to go to big cities, a lot of people couldn't process the different languages or different, it goes back, to especially during the Industrial Revolution. That's when it was first really diagnosed in most parts of the world. And so it's interesting, but I do it in a breezy way, a way that's kind of funny. And I think also, I probably went too far with some of the sick jokes. So I had to reel myself in. I have a really good half dozen friends who tell me if I've gone too far. And yes, I did go too far sometimes and reeled it back. So, but better to go too far than not far enough,
Absolutely. And the final question before we wrap up tonight, from Amanda. This is a great question too. Do you think that you still would have become an animal advocate / activist if you hadn't grown up as a gay punk rock outsider? If not, what do you think you'd be doing for work if you hadn't had the outsider experience?
I think the outsider experience helped me be a writer, and I was writing even before I started working at PETA. Back in the punk scene, I would write for fanzines, and I was arrested so many times in protest that my first published article was a connoisseur's guide to the world's jails, in which I rated each jail with 1 to 5 sheriff stars. I ranked them for food, hospitality, accommodation, whether or not they let you print before your mug shot. So I think writing is what I would be doing full time because I just always, since I was a child, I was compelled to do that. But because of my mother's wonderful example, I realized that animals really so desperately need our help. And there's such a, people don't realize how brilliant animals can be in their sophistication and communication. And so I was really lucky because I got to do both. Lifetime devoted to animal rights, but I'm able to write along the way. This book was a bit of a departure from my animal rights work, but it was something that I had to get out. And I'm hoping that people enjoy it and are illuminated by it in a few different ways.
Just don't take 11 years to write the next one, because I think we need to hear more from you sooner than that.
Definitely. And I'm sorry that I'm a little red up in here. I went swimming before and it's 93 degrees here today. And in this old Victorian doesn't have any insulation on that tin roof. So it does get a little hot here. So it's Jillian, you're getting me all hot and steamy, Jillian.
Oh, you too.
I always have. This is how he always is around me. I don't know.
Well, we're going to wrap it up for the evening.
You know how we are together.
I love it. I'm going to give each of you a minute to just tell us, I'll give you some final words. Is there anything, Jillian, that you want to say as final words? And then we're going to ask you where we can.
I would say this. Look, I've known Dan, as we stated, for over a decade. Not only is he one of the most one of the most incredible human beings that I have ever met in so many ways, beyond his advocacy, his empathy, his intelligence, his humor. And when you said we could go on for hours, we have gone on for hours, into the wee hours of the morning over multiple bottles of wine, because
and tequila.
That's right. Oh God. He's such an incredible, interesting human. And I have been fortunate enough to kind of be there along the way as he was crafting this book, and to see it finally come to fruition. It just makes me so proud for you, babe. And get the book. I mean, it's really life-changing. Yes, it's entertaining. Yes, it's heartfelt, but it's really life-changing. It puts a lot in perspective, and there's so much that you will end up identifying with, even though you think, well, I don't have a schizophrenia. Trust me. It's you will see so much of yourself in the characters. Do yourself a favor.
Excellent. And Jillian, you are accomplished in everything that you do as well. And so if people want to follow you or find out more about your videos and your podcast, where's the best place? Do you have I'm sure you have a website that everybody can.
I mean, whatever, JillianMichaels.com. You can
Perfect. Just go there and you find everything.
Yeah.
Excellent. Dan, any last words? Any final words for us?
Yes. Give yourself a break from the news. Give yourself a break from this world and read a book. This is, people are on social media. Everyone, we're all so frantic. And I think everyone just needs to give their mind a rest, get into a really good book. I'd be delighted if you'd read mine. It's funny. There's no politics in it. It was illuminating. But if it's not mine, just read another book, and preferably a funny one, because people need to learn to laugh a little more to get themselves through this era that we're in.
Any era it just makes you feel better to laugh. And Dan, do you have a website too for people?
Just the PETA website, or you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. My URL is Dismal Swamp Thing, all one word, just like it sounds.
I like that. Dismal Swamp Thing.
I live really close to the Great Dismal Swamp, and so.
You should have known it would be something like that.
I didn't know you were supposed to put your name.
Okay, you two. I'm taking us off of Facebook Live now. Let's wave goodbye to everybody. Everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Miss you, Jillian. See you soon. Love you.